Okay, welcome everyone to Finding Your Leverage Point for Making Change. This is Andrew Carberry with the Wallace Center, and very excited to partner with Joseph McIntyre today to offer this session around systems leadership skills through the Food Systems Leadership Network. So if you could go to the next slide, Joseph.
Andrew, you've
Oh,
got the
no, I
slides.
did. So if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, just share where you're calling in from. It's always fun to see that, and we'll be using the chat throughout this session to capture your thoughts and hear back. So we'll get started. Sounds like it's a nice day in New Orleans. We got Minneapolis, Washington, Oklahoma. Good to see everybody. So this is all through.
So what is that?
I'm hearing some audio. If you could mute yourself if you're not speaking, that would be helpful, just so everyone has clear audio. So this is through the Food Systems Leadership Network. And if you're new to the network, it's a national peer learning community that connects current and emerging leaders to strengthen individual and collective capacity and foster collaboration across communities. And our big goal for 2025 is that we would have 5,000 food systems leaders that have more resources, relationships, and power to realize equitable food systems to generate good food, health, and opportunity for all. And systems thinking, which is what we'll be focused on today, has been a core part of our design for the network and of everything we do throughout the 5 years that we've been going. And excited to share this with everyone. We've done it through systems leadership retreats in the past. That's this photo here. Folks getting together to work on these skills. It's also just part of how we design programs and has been very helpful to our team. So excited to share it with the network and have a discussion about it together. So I'll hand it over to Joseph McIntyre with 10 Circles Consulting, who's been our partner on systems thinking since the beginning, and just a really helpful guide in this, and sourcing from a lot of the great thinking on this over time. But we'll be sharing that with you today, along with examples from the food system.
Well, thanks a lot, Andrew, and it's so great to be with all of you today. I want to let you know something. I always have this tremendous feeling of gratitude when I have a chance to be with my friends in the Food Systems Leadership Network. I may not know you personally, but I know that you're out there doing incredibly important work. And that when I go to sleep at night and I'm worried or I'm upset by the day's news, I come back to that and I remember that everywhere you turn, there's thousands and like myself who are trying to work for a better world, and there's great for taking time today for learning a little bit more about leverage points and learning a little bit from one of my mentors and inspirations, Donella Meadows, who shared a schema for understanding leverage points that I'll be sharing today. So let me go ahead and take over the screen sharing and bring up what we're going to be looking at today. There we go. And I'll get to the right spot. So all of us are familiar with the term leverage. I thought this picture, which is an ancient woodblock, from 1824, that described how Archimedes of Syracuse thought about it. And he said that if you had a long enough lever, you could move the world. And I think that's something that all of us are looking for, is a lever that's long enough to move the world. But this idea of leverage has been around for a long time and shows up in many, many different. Go to the next page here. Hang on. There we go. In fact, our inspiration and sort of a heartbeat of a lot of the work that many of us do. Adrienne Maree Brown describes using her life as a way to leverage a shift in the system. And whether the lever is long, as Archimedes thought about it, or very personal, as Adrienne Maree Brown thinks about it, leverage is something that many of us care deeply about. And in fact, Donella Meadows writes that says that folks who do system analysis have been great belief in leverage points because they are these places in these complex systems, wherever they may be, where a small shift in one thing can produce big changes in everything. And that's what we're looking for today. Where is it that we can make our most pointed and effective effort to have a disproportional impact on things that we care about? At least that's what leverage means to me. But I want to stop and give you a chance before we even get very far into today for you to think for yourself for a minute. What does leverage mean to you? And when have you experienced it? We'll be capturing this in chat and sharing back some of these materials with you as part of the summation for today's webinar. And in fact, feel free to screen capture whatever you want, but this entire presentation will be available to you, actually even in an editable format, so that you can use it as it may benefit you. But what does leverage mean to you, and when have you experienced it? Go ahead and, if you can, take a minute and share a couple of ideas or examples in chat just to get us started. So in the context of negotiations, absolutely. That oppositional connotation is going to come back later on when we talk about power and leverage. So it's important, an important idea. I'll take. Yes, Stephanie, that's a beautiful definition. Being strategic and efficiently creating change without expending too many resources and spinning wheels. Now, if you've had the opportunity to experience where you've been able to actually use leverage, where your organizations have, those are really important for us to capture, because those amount to the positive stories that we can build on. And you're giving so many good ideas here. We've used leverage effectively with the regional office of USDA when we were working on COVID-19. So partnerships with the press, important because it has to do with information flows. So the thing that I wanted to point out here is all of us have a lived experience of leverage. What Donella Meadows and others who have thought about leverage points have done is sort of tried to codify your lived experience in a framework that may help us see leverage points that don't always come to mind. So, what we're going to do today is this. We'll spend a little time talking about leverage point thinking, and then the majority of our time together is going to be looking at leverage points in food systems. And I'll walk you through these 12 steps or 12 points of leverage that you may want to consider in your own work. We'll do questions and answers. And hopefully answers along the way, but we'll have some time at the end. In particular, I hope to do a little dialogue. So why don't we jump in and talk about core concepts for leverage point thinking? Now, I could have called this core concepts and systems thinking. I've come to believe that systems thinking, leverage point thinking, all of these are they're just another language like Arabic or French that we learn to talk about the world in. And I think they're really useful tools. But a couple of things I want to share with you is, one, the reason we're here, that systems are all around us. They can be simple mechanical systems like a watch, complex mechanical systems like a car, or very complex systems like the food distribution, emergency food distribution system, or the system for aggregating local food into a food hub. So we talk about these systems in their qualities. They're clock-like, like a little more mechanical, or they're cloud-like, which is a little more uncertain, and they move and change dynamically. Most of the systems that we care about are like these clouds. They're they're unpredictable, they're hard to control, they're constantly evolving. And that's why it's really important that we understand where are some of the leverage points that exist within them. I put up this particular slide because many of you would recognize an older way of thinking about food systems, that really breaks it up into these individual components. What we know now is each one of these is a system unto itself. They're all linked together, and they operate not only just as a single system, but they operate in different scales. So they've got the scale of the farm, and then the scale of all of the food production. So one of the things about systems is that they are complex or more simple, and their scales may be small or large. And where we draw the boundaries or what we're interested in is part of our work. Most of us, or many of us, are focused on the systems that affect the immediate health and well-being of our communities, some of our regions, some of our states. So systems are all around us. Many of you have probably seen this. This is what we call the iceberg model. And the iceberg model has only one thing that's really important to take away today, which is that what we see on the surface, whether that's farmers who are leaving the land, or the number of people who are food insecure, or the number of corner grocery stores that sell healthy foods. These are just the tip of the iceberg. And what we want to do as leverage point thinkers is to work our way down underneath the waterline to try to see, one, the patterns of behavior over time. So what happens over time? And those of you who have spent time in looking at America's history of colonialism and slavery will see repeating patterns all the time, because they happen over and over again. They happen in many frames. System structures. How does the system work such that it produces the outcome it does? This is the crux of where leverage point work is, and we'll talk about it more specifically. And at the bottom of the iceberg, the most difficult and most pervasive is this idea of the mental models. What actually are the ideas that create it? So the idea that accumulation of wealth is the goal of life, or the idea that markets are the most efficient way to move goods and services. Whatever these deep mental models are, they live down way below the waterline, and usually require some effort to bring forward. So how do you find leverage points? So I want to show you a picture. And this is a picture that I've modified from something that Donella Meadows used. And I want to ask you to take a thought exercise with me. Take, for example, that you're concerned with the acres of land that are producing for a local market. This is the center of your concern. This is where you want to make your change. What's always happening in that, and this is a systems thinking concept, is that new acres are coming into production and some are going out. And for you as a change leader, you can be thinking about, how do I encourage more new acres coming in? That's one kind of leverage point. And that's why this little arrow, poor as it is, forgive me for not being a better graphic artist, will show you that you could focus on new acres. And you might think about here issues having to do with land tenure or urban agriculture, or use of open space, conversion of open space into agriculture for local markets. Or you could be thinking about how to prevent acres from leaving local production. So this would be thinking about the profitability of farming for small farmers, their ability to access markets or capital, or any number of things that would cause farmers to go out of business, or acres to go out of local production. In systems thinking or leverage point thinking, we consider these inflows, our goal, and outflows. Sometimes the goals are called stocks, the total amount of something that we're working with, but I think I find it a little bit of a disembodied term for people like ourselves that are so much operating from our heart. Just to give you another example, you could think about this in terms of community food security. So where are the leverage points to prevent people from becoming insecure? Where are the leverage points to support people who are leaving insecurity? And in doing that, how do we actually hit our goal of reducing the number? So as we work today, I'm going to encourage you to be thinking about what is the goal that you're trying to apply leverage point thinking to? What is it that really matters to you? What's the goal, the stock, the thing that's at the center of it? That will help our work as we go along. Now, having worked with this for a long time, I've come up with, what I feel like are sort of 7 principles of leverage point thinking, and we'll try to apply these as we go on today. So the first one is, I think, common sense. All systems have multiple leverage points. And it is a direct corollary to the next one. There's no one magic leverage point. All leverage points, all there are ones that we're more or less able to access. Some are really hard to get at. Think about that, the ability to change the mental model of race in America and how difficult that is, and how much effort it takes. So it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. We have to do it, but we understand that it takes a tremendous amount of work to get there. We're going to look at a model of 12 leverage points, but one of the things that I want you to know is that these leverage points that we're going to talk about today, they intersect. It's not like if I'm working on food insecurity and I publish a report that's about the numbers of people, those are 2 different levers, that they don't, there's not a cross-fertilization or a cross-impact. Something that you wrote in your notes here: find the leverage points that maximize your impact given your resources, influence, and power. And this is the work of our time. Here's a couple. The next 3 are sort of in the line of caveats. As we work with leverage points and as we do systems change, it's really important to be prepared for delays. I know many of you, like me, probably feel enormous pressure to move everything today. And we do have to be fully engaged with every aspect of our being in this moment to make things better. But we also know that not everything we plant today will yield a fruit tomorrow. Some of them take multiple seasons. So even strong leverage points often don't create immediate change. This also leads to the next corollary: learn, iterate, and learn again. As we use these leverage points, this goes back to what Adrienne Brown talks about: grow as you experience leverage, change, allow what's real to emerge. And then finally, watch out for unintended consequences, because sometimes when we push one lever, it produces unfortunate outcomes in another place. So we could be focusing tremendously on focusing on emergency food and emergency hunger and not pay enough attention to poverty reduction. That would be an example of unintended consequence. So here's the big question, and all of us who work in this field have to constantly ask this question: so what about power? Lots of folks would say power itself is a leverage point. Maybe. I'm certainly not going to argue with people who are smarter than I am, but my experience is this: all leverage points require power to move. And power of all types are used. So let me give you 3 examples. So you know that large meat packing firms have market power owing to the size of what they control to dictate what kind of animal agriculture is produced. This is the power Smithfield has over thousands, old thing out of Monsanto's playbook. But there's also the power of communities to demand local procurement. So we know there are lots of different ways to use power. So when we discover potent leverage points, understand that those leverage points can be used by actors of all interests to drive change in the direction that they prefer. This is pretty important for our work, because one of the things that we can do to identify leverage points is to look at how other actors are working. So think about our efforts, to encourage healthy eating through public service announcements versus the efforts of some restaurant firms to influence what constitutes a good meal. We're using the same kind of method, but their microphone or megaphone might be larger. Our focus on land tenure by and for BIPOC communities versus the consistent underfunding of TA or land resources for those communities. They're not accidental. People understand that if you actually had a strong cadre of BIPOC-led farms, it changes what agriculture is, and that begins to erode the overall picture of what the modern industrial food system could look like. This one, it may seem counterintuitive, but it's I think important. Power is accountable to its source, and pressuring the source can be powerful leverage. And I want to give you an example. This last one, this first one here, corporations to shareholders. So we know that in Western capitalism, corporations theoretically have a fiduciary responsibility to put the interest of their shareholders above all else. We also know that groups of shareholders and activists have gotten together to encourage corporations to think about environmental, social, and governmental governance issues as part of their overall responsibility to their shareholders. Well, I think you'll note, if you think about what kind of debates are going on in the world right now, that there's pressure being put on by some interests to prevent pension funds and others from taking into consideration environmental, social, and governance issues. Why maximize? And that immediately provokes a response to try to mute that effect. Politicians to their funders, local NGOs to their communities. So we can think about how do you actually work with power by putting pressure on their sources. So let me stop for a second, take a breath. I see a lot of yeses there. Let me scroll up and see the first one. Yeah. Oh, am I freezing? Oh, I am so sorry. Let me, I got a really good bandwidth connection, so I'm not sure what's happening. Okay, if it gets to be a problem, Andrew, let's switch and have you do the screen share. Thank you for the heads up on that. There we go. So I want to get into the leverage points themselves. And before I do, I want to introduce you to somebody, and that's Donella Meadows. Dana was born in the 40s and passed away in the early 2000s. And she was, without question, one of the most brilliant systems thinkers, social change advocates, and amazing people that you could ever meet. And she did an incredible amount of work to help us understand why it is that the world we live in is as crazy as it is. She was an early author of a book called Limits to Growth, which is one of the very first books that that explored the fact that actually you couldn't grow to infinity and not have an environmental and social impact. She is the developer of so many of our core systems thinking. And she gave us a model of leverage points, and we'll go through these one by one. But one of the things I want to point out about Dana is she originally gave this to us in 1999. She saw leverage being a hierarchy from lower to higher leverage. And I think for those of us who've worked in systems thinking over the years since then, we've come to realize that it's more of a mandala. It's more, looks a little bit more like this, that really there are these 12 different, which we've named. I think there are probably many more than this, but these 12 that we've named that are all working in concert and operating at one time. And again, going back to those principles that I talked to you before, what matters are which of these levers can you move with the resources and skills that you have. And so I'm not going to read all of these at this point because we're going to go through them all 12, but I will tell you that they're clustered. So the ones in yellow have to do with the physical structure of the food system. So when we talk about that, I mean, like, where are the distribution hubs? Where are the trucks? Where do the roads go? Where's the water flow? These are the way the system is built. How many acres are in it? So some of us work in this area. The ones in blue have to do with the flow of information and behavior in the system. So how many things are vicious cycles that repeat and get worse? How many are flows of information that have changed the way people think? The ones that are in purple have to do with the goals of the system and who controls them, what are they, and how do we influence them? And the ones in gray have to do with the fundamental mindset. So in some ways that they follow our way down the iceberg, with the physical structure maybe a little easier to see and the mindset a little bit harder to get to or influence. But the fact is that they are all together as a piece as we work. So let's stop for a second because I've talked now for a good 30 minutes and we could stand a break. Share with me, if you can, in chat, what is your systems change goal and what leverage points are you using? Now, I'm not saying use Dana's method because we didn't go through it yet, but what do you see as your goal and what lever are you trying to use to make it real? Great. Fair and just food system. Perfect. Big goal. Local food for everyone. Okay. Lisa, and go one step further. What's the lever to do that? What's the way that you try to get local food to everybody? Willow, beautiful. Nourish more people, less resources. Lisa said, let's go back, Lisa, to yours. Hang on. So Lisa's multiple channels of food, retail, wholesale, and food boxes. So that's changing the physical structure, the way food gets to people. Beautiful. Amanda talks about economic power, basic income for all. That's a leverage point. That's actually in the fiscal system as well. To support and encourage more intersectional policy design. Ken, work with local officials and food industries, think about critical thinking. So we unpack the assumptions people make, mental models, and to form systemic theories of change, so that we don't get bogged down in counting beans exclusively. Indeed, that's one of the key things that systems thinking likes to encourage us to do. Rachel, working to create a food secure North Minneapolis, leveraging a vast network of growers, educators, and community organizers, including my university and county resources. And my guess is that you're maybe trying to get them structured so that they're using their power and influence and resources more effectively to get more food into that system. How about any others? Thank you. Well, leverage point, elevate small scale producers into decision-making roles, reevaluate food resources based on nutritional and environmental footprints. Beautiful. So this is about having the power to influence the system. And you'll see that's one of the key leverage points. And Ellen, there you go. Let's back up for you. Yeah, and like I said, we've got a ways to go yet. I'll bring that system principle slide back up too in a minute. I don't want to go too far backwards, or we won't get all the way through. So, But let me quickly just see if I can jump back there. I'm going to change the view that I'm in so I can get back to that slide a little more easily. There you go. And we will share these with everyone. Tell you what, let's do this. Let's press ahead a little bit and let me talk to you about some of these actual leverage points that Donella Meadows wrote about. And we will do a little bit more thinking about how we are working with them. And in a few minutes, we'll take a little bit longer, like wiggle break, and give you a chance to do some more absorption of what you're doing. Thank you so much for your attention. It's really an honor to be able to be here and do this work with you. Okay, let me go back to where we were. So we talked about these leverage points that have to do with the physical system. And Ken pointed out something that was really important. The first one of the leverage points that Dana brought our attention to were what she called parameters and numbers. This is the count of things, the number of corner stores that feature healthy food, the acres of BIPOC owned land, the size of a sugar beverage tax, the amounts of CO2 emitted, budgets for low income farmer assistance. And these fixed targets are useful, but they rarely talk to us or address why there's so little BIPOC owned land, or why wells are being lost to drought. It's a big issue, and I'm based in California, and a lot of my work lately has been around farming and water. And so one of the things that's important about knowing about these numbers is they're often really expensive to change, but they become critically important as they reach tipping points. So let's talk about climate and CO2. For a long time, Bill McKibben and his climate group organized around 350 parts per million amount of carbon emitted in the atmosphere. We're well past that now. We're in the 400s. But at some point, you reach a tipping point on these numbers and the whole system change. So many of us think about systems change from the standpoint of, let's get the number right. It's a good way to think. Buffer sizes. Now, here's something many of us probably don't even think about. And to be able to tell you the truth, they're all around us, but they're hidden. So what is a buffer? Well, what keeps a system from not tipping over into collapse or whatnot? So think about dams. They're a huge buffer against the short variations in rainfall. This is a California talking to you, having just lived through a huge drought. Savings accounts are a buffer against variations in income. But there are buffers that are hugely important to us that we pay much less attention to. The atmosphere's capacity to absorb pollutants is a huge buffer. The amount of food that's held in disaster emergency funds, the amount of irrigation water held and on farms, healthy soils initiatives. If you're interested in healthy soils, one of the reasons we do them is to make the soil a better buffer to hold more water, hold more nitrogen, emit less GHGs. So, but these buffers they're real and they're physical, and they tend to be large, and they're hard to build up. It's why we have to take so much effort around them. Material stocks and flows. Boy, that's a fancy name for the way the darn thing is built. So if you're, spend time on farms and in farming communities or in urban areas around food distributions, this is irrigation infrastructure. This is the location and the scale of processing facilities, the distribution of grocery stores, where silos and other grain feed and storage is, how mass market animal ag infrastructure is, where food hubs exist. So this is the food system as you can touch it, see it, and visit it. And one of the things that is happening and has been happening for hundreds of years is the tendency for the food system to move farther and farther away from consumers, to become more and more specialized, and to be disassociated from the sort of day-to-day life and experience of the people who benefit from food. And so one of the things I know as food advocates we've been trying to do for decades is to try to bring the food system back close home, back to local farms, to farm markets, to all kinds of interventions that are about putting good food closer to people and exposing and giving people the opportunity to grow and enjoy healthy food. So material stocks and flows. So those three areas, numbers, buffers, materials, or the structure of the system, are places that many of us work in. I just thought I'd stop here and give us a chance to kind of get ourselves into a little leverage point thinking. Are you familiar with examples of where people are sort of are trying to work the leverage of rebuilding maybe the physical structure of the food system, or focusing on the numbers, or actually working on the buffers? So for example, do any of you work on soil health initiatives? Yeah, small scale meat processing. Thank you, Ellie. Great example. Yeah, we're in California. We've been working with mobile animal processing. Land trust, preserving farmland, great example. Cold structure, physical infrastructure, publicly funded community food hubs, exactly, because we recognize there's a missing piece there. Community gardens, what a great example. Completely shift our relationship to the way food is done, and can be a huge way to lift up communities towards more health. Regenerative ag, absolutely. Looking at the practices and structures. One of the things that's really important about regenerative agriculture is that this is a really good example of a leverage point that's more than one thing at once. It does something practical on a farm, but it comes from a completely different mindset. And that mindset ripples out and affects others as it's shown to be effective. Local and regional food security coalitions could be working in this place if they're working on making sure that food is where it needs to be, in the right place at the right time. Yeah, seed banks are another good example, really good. So I think the point that I wanted to stop here as we go into this is to show that we actually have in the food system lots of leverage points that we have and operate on. And the question is, are we pressing them with all of our might and heart? Are there ways for us to work together more effectively to build stronger coalitions, to build a longer lever, if you would? So it's a like I said, even for me and for all of us, it's a literate learning and iterative process. So let's keep going a little bit, and we'll go for just a few more minutes, and then we'll take a little bit of a regular break. Now, this next set of three are places that you will recognize as being things that we in the food system care about a lot. And they're very systems thinking oriented. So I'm going to show you some diagrams here that will look a little bit different than some of the things that maybe you've seen so far today. So the first thing I want to talk about is that lots of times the things that we care about are important, but they have a delay in their impact. And I want to use an example that is outside of food systems because it's just really poignant. We know investment in preschool.
You hear that? I hope that they don't hear me.
Majid, if you could go on mute, thank you. Is the investment in early childhood education. It doesn't pay off necessarily, quote, pay off, what a crazy way of talking about human beings. But we begin to really see how much better a society we have when we make these investments some 15 or 20 years later. the time it takes for environmental restoration projects to mature. So sometimes if you want to restore a marsh, it could take decades before we see it. But let's look at one that really matters to us. So I want to walk you through this diagram here that's down with the blue circles. And you'll notice that there's arrows between each of these, and that you'll notice that there's plus marks between this. This is called a reinforcing loop. It means that all things working well, they build on each other and will continue to build on each other. So for example, as the food hub begins to have impact, it increases the access to markets. As farmers have more access to markets, they can sell more and they increase their profitability and their welfare. This encourages more production to happen under their auspices and increases their food hub, the impact of the food hub. So this is what we call a classic virtuous reinforcing loop. But notice how there's little breaks in the arrows here. These are gaps. So the gap of time between the time a food hub is installed and the time that it actually begins to have real impact on access to markets can be significant. It can take years to get fully up to speed. The same thing, the gap between the time that a farmer begins to see additional economic well-being and the time that production goes up, that can be that can be a gap too. And so the question is, can we reduce those delays? The efforts to do that can be really a key leverage point. So making sure that we bring faster and quicker technical and financial assistance to farmers in conjunction to food hubs could be a way to reduce delays. Now, I do want to come back to something that is in the chat and that Susan Dallendan added. She says, I think a bigger question is, are we focusing on the right leverage points? I'm afraid you've caught the rabbit under my hat. I could stand a hat because that really is the question that's in front of us. So these delays are real, and there are sometimes opportunities for us to I'm going to give another one, balancing feedback loops. Now, most systems, if a system only was made up of reinforcing loops, it would spin out of control. Think about the system for regulating appetite, right? If I like ice cream, I eat a lot of ice cream, it makes me feel good, I want another ice cream, but at some point I get full and I know that the next ice cream doesn't taste as good to me. That's a natural balancing loop within my body and my system. So it's an attempt to slow undesired outcomes, or it can be used to slow desired ones as well. We see them all the time. Progressive income taxes is a form of a balancing loop. So are carbon dioxide taxes. But let's look at the example here of food banking for hunger relief, right? So as hunger goes up, that we hope that food banks' capacity to address it increases, and that reduces hunger, so it balances out. Conservation easements are also a balancing feedback loop. So let's look at this one. Now notice this diagram has got 4 pluses and a minus, and that means that it's a balancing loop. And here you can see that if we're talking about a community that's experiencing malnutrition, that drives negative health impacts and health costs, and that increases the gap of resources available for food. We inject in that system a program to bring more resources to communities in the form of double up food bucks. That shifts the dynamic and reduces, we hope, the degree of malnutrition. So it's a balancing loop. And these you can think about these in lots of forms, but those are ones that I think of as the first. The counterpoint to those are to drive reinforcing loops. Now I'm just going to start by talking you through this blue one, because this blue circle that's all got pluses around it is one of our most common shared theories of change. And it really starts that if there's enough money to buy healthy food, you have the opportunity to purchase more healthy food. That drives more income for small farmers and farmers in general, puts more money into communities. It increases the demand for local services, drives local job creation, and creates more money for food. And Ahmad, yes, the meeting will be made as available as a recording. This is going to be an evergreen presentation. So yes, you can see how this positive reinforcing loop is something that we're trying to create. And we could change what's in the circles to fit your experience a little bit more, but by and large, what we're trying to do is to spin up the strength and agency and power of the alternative community-based food system. And that starts by making sure there's enough resources. So these reinforcing loops build on themselves. It's important to know that they can also be vicious. The flow of money out of a community means there's less money in the community to buy healthy food, means that food outcomes get worse, means the costs get worse, means that there's less money in the community. So you can see these reinforcing loops in both as virtuous and vicious. Success to the successful is one of the hallmarks of Western privilege, meaning if you are born in a privileged family, you'll have the resources to be able to take advantage of that, to go to good schools, to get a better job, to pass that along to your children, for them to in turn do well. So these loops are all around us. A couple more examples there for you to look at: farmers markets increasing income to encourage more markets, and veggie RXs. I think between these balancing loops and reinforcing loops, you see a lot of the work that food systems folks are involved in. But this last one will seem familiar to many of you. And this is the structure of information. What if you didn't know exactly the impact your farming operation was having on groundwater in your community, and groundwater levels in your community were declining? Well, in fact, actually, that's the situation in California. Very few farmers actually know, and collectively, we absolutely do not know the amount of water that's being extracted from groundwater basins underneath people's homes and farms as a collective matter. So there's an information gap there that makes it impossible to change behavior, or very, very difficult. We think about here, I want to make a distinction between advertising, which is sort of information that's designed to change the way that you your appetites, if you would, from data that is about how well your system's performing. And that's what this is really about. When we talk about a tragedy of commons, which is a shared resource that nobody individually has the incentive to maintain and manage on their own well, but collectively will collapse because of that, it's often the case that there's just not any information going back. And there's lots of data that we have that's out there, but misses having impact because in our world and time, the information isn't received or incorporated into our thinking because of polarization. Here are some examples in food systems of people that really use data. The portrait of Sonoma County, there's this portrait projects all over the country, measures of American data on health disparities, the 50-state food system scorecard that the Union of Concerned Scientists do, product nutrition labels are designed this way, and consumer-facing certification labels. But the question is, are we giving people information that actually causes them to understand the system better and change? And do they have the resources and the capacity to be able to do that? And that's something that we have to think of as a community. Now, I'm not able to watch everything that goes on in the chat along the way. I can appreciate you leaning in. I appreciate the comments. Let's go to the next one here, and I think we're in a perfect time for a little break. There we go. So we've talked about the lever points that have to do with the physical structure of the system, the roads, the bridges, the numbers, the buffers. And we've talked about those that have to do with the way the system works, the loops, the repetitive behaviors. This section is about the way the system is built, if you would. Not physically, but sort of the rules and the ability to evolve it and the goals. And here you start to get into things that if you can move these levers, if you can change the goal of the system, you start to be able to have rippling effects that are quite powerful. So the rules of the system. This is probably the most common place that policy advocates operate from. This is their work. They're trying to rewrite the rules, make them fair, make them more accessible. So, NSAC's work fits in here, but there are other important organizations that I think you should know about. Open Market Institutes, Food and Power, Antitrust and Monopoly work, very important. One of the things that is really in the way of the evolution of a genuinely responsive food system is the concentration of size amongst certain sectors of our industry, whether that's the meat production or the seed manufacturing or the big firms like ADM and Cargill. Food policy councils try to work on this, and an example of this would be local food procurement, right? So changing the rules so that local entities, schools, communities, prisons, actually buy local food. Zoning and local regional land use planning. The one thing that is important to note here is that funding programs generally do not change the rules unless the rules of the funding change. And that's a tricky little piece. The question is, how much effort do we put into trying to change the rules, knowing that there's a countervailing force that will try to change the rules back? And I'll just tell you a very quick story. At one point in my work in California, sustainable farms were taking advantage of the use of interns who wanted to work on their farms and learn about sustainable practices. And the California State Farm Bureau actually passed legislation to prevent these small farms from making use of intern labor under the special sort of terms that they were being compensated under, because they didn't want the competition. And so changing rules can often mean the rules get changed. But look at some of the other examples of rules: keeping or eliminating daylight savings time, how dams are operated in drought areas, obligations corporations, rules for voting. Some of these rules are critically important to what we do. So I want us to really understand that the rules of the game are what we're at when we do policy work, and we want to make sure the rules that we're changing are the ones that have the biggest impacts. The next one here are to actually talk about the goals of the system. And I put out two quotes for you because I thought they're just such a classic example of the dichotomy in American thinking. So Earl Butz was a former head of the Department of Food and Agriculture, and he said flat out to farmers, get big or get out. And he said, plant from fence row to fence row. And so he was giving a model of what agriculture should be: large, monocultured, fully planted, and absolutely separate from the rest of our world. And then read what our brothers and sisters from Soulfire Farm say: with deep reverence for the land and wisdom of our ancestors, we work to reclaim our collective right to belong to the earth and to have agency in the food system. So the goal of the system, or the goal that we're trying to get at here, is so very, very, very different. And we really are up against goals of the system that really work against many of the things that we care deeply about. Our economic system, for example, one of the goals actually is to concentrate power and minimize competition. One of the goals of our of white supremacy culture is to ensure its privileges over other races. So generally, these goals are hard to shift, except when powerful voices articulate new goals. And unfortunately, a lot of the powerful voices that are articulating new goals for our system now are not necessarily articulating goals that we're supportive of. And so this is where a lot of the debate about race in schools is coming from, and the whole debate about the advanced placement curriculum. So what is the goal, and what information matters to people? And then there's this one, the power to evolve self-organizing system structure. So do we and can we create more power to evolve natural living systems? This is what we call resilience. It's what Octavia Butler and Adrienne Maree Brown called emergence. It is being in concert and in line with evolution, which favors diverse systems. And we see it happening in the food system space. The best example was the incredible response during COVID, and how we flexed and moved and created new ways and new answers so quickly. But you also see it from the way that BIPOC communities are working to rebuild economies and ways of being that are outside of the frame of Western power and Western ideas, so that there's this ferment going on. But in many cases, our power to self-organize and evolve systems can be limited. And this is a place where, how do we come together and create and align more of our movement's power so that we can self-organize? So these three areas are sort of really central to the North Star of food systems. Now, I want to stop and ask at this point, what examples, when you think about these goals of the system, do you see our movement using? And how are we being effective? What levers are we managing to press? Certainly one of the ones, just to give you an example, I think of is certainly the idea of organic as an alternative. Now, I don't want to go into the details of why that's an incomplete story, but that's one. What are some other ways that you see us explicitly trying to describe different goals of the system, trying to self-organize, and trying to kind of take the high road about what constitutes a good food system? Let's share those in chat. And I'll seed one.
Joseph, could you articulate that question one more time?
Sure. And clearly I didn't say it very well. Thank you for doing that. So actually, let me go back. I'm going to go backwards for a second here. And I want to be mindful of. So where are we working effectively to influence the rules of the system, to take the power to evolve the system structure, and to impact the goals of the system itself? So I just want to just lift those up because these are areas where I know many of us really spend a lot of time on this. Was that helpful, Elizabeth?
Yeah, super. Thanks.
Great. Investing in co-ops versus corporations. Exactly, Maria. That's great. So redirecting the goal. Yeah, Ken, every chance BIPOC people can take to create systems that now we're in the flow on their own terms and also incite change in the broader system. Yeah, producers defining their market systems. They're not growing for a global system, but carefully evaluating, thinking about what to market, how to reach. Yeah. Yeah. Access to capital, creative measure credit work, CSAs, absolutely. CSAs were actually one of the very first most effective changes in models in making and advancing our work. It's interesting. Early in the food movement's work, a lot of the voices for shifting the goals of the system were chefs who were talking about food. I think we've since matured as a movement and is shifting our focus and trying to listen to our BIPOC brothers and sisters about where we need to go forward and what we need to carry from the lineage that they can share and bring up for us. So we've shifted a little bit. Local groups of farmers and local food lovers that create opportunities for each other. Yes. So this whole idea of shifting the focus. One of the things that you'll notice about this, the power to evolve self-organizing system structures and the goals of the system, is that these become increasingly bigger and more difficult things to do. They're rarely something that one CBO can do on their own. There's something that we collectively have to do, and lifting up the voices of our brothers and sisters who have perspectives that are outside of the Western framework, who are come from long lineages of tradition, are very, very powerful if we want to address the goals of the system. Just to give you one other example from my own, one of the things that I was so proud of, I was working in Ventura County, which is a place where they grow a lot of vegetables right on the coast in California, and they have a tremendous problem with farm worker housing, and they've done a lot of organizing there, and they do an annual fundraiser, and one of the things that they've done now is farm workers are now speaking in Spanish to the community, which is largely white and dominant culture, and changing the idea of who's leaders and what the actual goal of food systems are in that community. And it just is a question of who's got the microphone in some cases. So let's push on. There's just two more to look at. And these I wanna really slow down and think about. We live in a moment where there are mindsets that cause the system to be what it is. One of the mindsets that many farmers have that I know of is that we're price takers and not price makers, and therefore we don't have agency to change the way we operate, and we're not free to be able to work. I hear so many people who produce food say that we're at the beck and call of Walmart or Costco or whoever it may be. These are our mindsets of how we have to be. There are so many of the basic mindsets that were Eurocentric that are coming over that are being challenged in this moment, and our work in food systems is part of that challenge. So whether it's a cisgen nuclear family as a central family structure, or the idea that our friends in Bhutan have had for a very long time, the difference between gross national happiness versus gross national product. So what is the mindset that we want to shift at the base of what is the food system that doesn't work. And how do we do it? Yeah. So USDA grant making to explicitly prioritize outreach to new producers. So there's the mindset. And then there's the ability to stand outside of paradigms altogether. And one of the things that I've learned by working with my friends in the indigenous world and with BIPOC leaders of all types is that there is knowledge that's outside of popular knowing. There is wisdom that has existed, that's resisted Western paradigms. There is truth that lies outside the ideas of truth that we've received. This is, at its deepest level, what I believe that Adrienne Maree Brown talks about is what is emergent and emergent strategy. It is our ability to say, hey, this isn't the good life, but the good life is available to us if we, and then you fill in the blank. So many of the things that we try to do operate on the things that we can see, the physical structures, the loops and recurring patterns. Yet so much of the work that we need to do is to begin to burrow in and try to influence the goals and the mindsets of the system, something that we have to come together as a movement to work on collectively. And it's here where there's tremendous opportunity for a revival of genuine humanness. And I have tremendous hope in our ability to access that. So we've just got a few minutes left together, about 15, and I want to just give you a little sense of the road ahead. This slide's a little bit like slide 7, slightly different content, but I think you'll find it helpful. So I want to suggest there's like a 6-step approach to doing this work. And the first is to simply understand the system that you're working to change. Remember, I said systems are all around us. They're big and they're small. They connect and they can be looked at separately. Many of us find ourselves working in multiple systems. That's great, and that's perfectly fine. But what you do in each part of each system makes a difference. So understand what is the system you're working on? What's its boundaries? How does it work? What drives it? And how then do you influence it? Look for the leverage points anywhere amongst the 12 or others that you may find. And here I want to go back to a point that came up in chat, and I've mentioned as well, evaluate how other players are using the leverage points in the system. Because many times part of our job is to be a countervailing force to a lever that may be pushing us further and further along. So, the idea, for example, that all food, the most secure and stable food source is food that's grown in glass houses. An interesting place. You want to choose to work on the leverage points that you have unique skills and power around. This is a repeat from 7, but it's so important that each of you have this unique and brilliant insight into the system. That's what Adrienne Maree Brown talked about when she said, I use my life to leverage this change that I want. So we want to understand what our unique and powerful way of changing the system is and use it, and find others who are using it and bind together in building coalitions to work leverage points that require collective action. Our work requires strengthening our personal and collective patience, humility, and awareness. I cannot tell you how much I've had to unlearn in my life. And if I'm lucky, I will have many, many, many more years to unlearn them so that I can learn what is emerging and is true in the moment. Because in many ways, the effort of finding a leverage point is about learn, adjust, and learn some more. It's an ongoing cycle that is both rewarding and a life's work. And I'm so grateful that you're on that life's work. But I want to take the next few minutes now to answer some questions. I'm going to stop the share, and let's go ahead and we can do this in real time. And I'm not going to be the only one to answer questions, because there's so many brilliant leverage point thinkers here on our call together. But I want to invite you to offer any questions or observations from today's presentation. And Willow did it perfect, right? She used her hand, raised her hand. So Willow, you're up. If you unmute yourself, and off we go.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joseph. This was really great. What an excellent presentation, so valuable. I kind of asked this question a little bit in the chat, and there were some really great responses already. But one of the things that I struggle with in trying to communicate these concepts to like my broader team, and then to the communities where we're working, is that first step on your steps slide, the understanding your system step. Yes. And the part where you see where the leverage points are requires that you be able to sort of characterize your system and understand your system. And I know there's many pretty complex manuals and toolkits and whatnot for systems analysis, but I was wondering if you or anyone else here had tips for like a simplified, straightforward process, or something that could be used even in the field with different stakeholders to characterize a system, in sort of an easier, more accessible and kind of rapid way.
You bet. Let me offer two from my experience and throw this open to the floor to others. First of all, I really recommend the Omidyar Group's systems practice guides. If you're not familiar with them, we'll make sure that we make a link to them. They do have, it's still complex, but it's a faster way of getting through it. But I do think very simple storytelling is one of the most powerful ways. Tell me, how is it that things are the way they are? Because if you just ask that question and you draw it up on a board using pictures, my experience is that people will tell you. I suppose a third way that I do it is I also ask people, tell me what the problem is, and then what's making it worse and what's making it better, because that is a beginning way of getting at it. So, and hey, Ken, I want you to jump in and share what you've got, because I've respected your work for decades. So please.
I don't want to break into your show. I just wanted to put that in the chat. But just to say that my book does have 8 examples of people around the country who've done wonderful works nudging systems levers, and has a pretty good in-depth story about each of those places and the coalitions that people form to make it happen, and also in my analysis of what those levers are and what some of the more general levers would be. So
great.
Just want to throw that in the hopper to add to it. This is a really wonderful presentation that's much easier to understand than a lot of system shows I've seen. So thank you for doing that.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Any other responses to Willow, things that you've done or seen done that make doing that, understanding the system more accessible, easier to do out in the field? So, and Will, feel free to follow up with me directly about it, because I've done it a few different ways out in the field, just the way you've talked about. So we can go into some more detail. Thank you so much. And Ashley, you're right. Creating a visual network map is so helpful. What we're looking for are simple story visual tools to take the complexity out of it. Other questions or comments that you might have for me or the other brilliant people who are with us on our call today? Oh, there's a hand. Ellen, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. It's gotten my wheels turning for sure. So I'm excited about that. This is a little less of a question and more of a just reaching out to the group to say, I'm looking to connect with folks who are working in food systems on the livestock side. So, you know, anybody on this call would be a great potential partner, thought partner. So I would love to, if anybody's out there, let me know. And maybe we can continue this great conversation that you've started after.
Absolutely, Ellen, and we'll get that. And I hope some of my friends from the Wallace Center will connect you too with their counterparts in their regenerative ag group, who also do a lot of livestock stuff. So they have a lot of great contacts there.
Thank
Ahmad,
you.
please. Ahmad, if you unmute yourself, we'll be able to hear you. Well, we'll give Ahmad a chance to there you go.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yeah, my button wasn't working when it needed to, but it was when it didn't. Anyway, moving forward, for Ellen, if you would put your information in the chat. Oh, it's already there. Oh, no. If you would, please. I work with the Central Valley region as in one hat that I wear. I know that we certainly have some livestock producers that would be happy to learn about opportunities. Thank you for the presentation, everybody.
It's so grateful to have you with us, Ahmad, and thank you for your work in the Central Valley, an important place to work.
And someone, could you mute me back because my function is not working? Thank you.
I think we can do that. Thank you. We got it. All right. Any other questions for today? Otherwise, I think we'll go to wrap up. And I'm not trying to rush along, but all right. Let me. I'm just going to go back and put this back up for just a second. So I want to end today by just offering some thanks. It's been my privilege to work with the folks at the Wallace Center and the Food Systems Leadership Network for over half a decade now, and today's call is just such a great testament to the work that they have done to bring us together, to create a community of people who are focused on the heart of the heart. And I've just been so grateful for their support and love. I want to big a shout out to one of my colleagues, Katie Maman, who is with Water Bear Collective, an amazing systems thinker. And if you're looking for somebody who is a great thought partner, look her up. She's amazing. And big thanks to Rachel Reichenbach, who also carried this systems leadership material forward this year and incorporated a lot of these ideas. And I also just want to be really grateful to all of my ancestors, teachers, and guides, and in particular to Donella Meadows, who has influenced me still and so much. It's just a great honor to be with you all here. I do want you to know that this is available to you under a Creative Commons license, which means you can use it and share it as may benefit you and the people that you work with. And with that, I'm going to say thank you and turn it back over to Andrew for any last thoughts.
All right, thank you, Joseph, so much for sharing that, and any willingness to share the materials. We'll send those to everyone afterwards with the recording. I just put a link in the chat to a discussion board on the Food Systems Leadership Network where we can keep the conversation going. We'll start a thread for this topic if you want to talk about just this training, or you can jump into others that are already going. And because our leverage point we're using is around changing knowledge, I'm going to share a quick poll for those that were here to share how this, how you learned or sharpened skills, and a quick rating of the session. So we appreciate your feedback on that for us and to Joseph. But that's it for today. Thank you all for coming, and hope to see you around on the FSLN.